So, hello and welcome to AmeriCorps VISTA and the first webinar of your orientation, Countdown to VISTA Service. This brief period before you start service next week is a great opportunity to learn about how VISTA works, your benefits, and more. My name is Chris Hawks, and I am joined by Andy King. We will be your host today from VISTA. You will also see our colleagues Kyle Banker and Eric Powell, as well as our partners at LSI, Jeff Banas and Mike Deeks, in the chat and Q&A throughout the session. And we love seeing your comments in the chat before we begin about what motivated you to join. I know this is a super exciting time as you're gearing up to start your VISTA year, and I'm so happy to be with you today.
And this is Andy King. I want to add my welcome as well, and thank you for joining AmeriCorps VISTA. I'm so happy to meet you. I hope this year will be a powerful experience for you, and look forward to helping you to get started. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. In this session, we'll start out with a brief introductions, and we'll give you an overview of the AmeriCorps VISTA program, as well as your VISTA member orientation. Then we'll jump into some of the burning questions that you may have, questions for your VISTA project and your site supervisor, questions for other contacts in your VISTA network, and then questions for us here on the VISTA staff. We'll take a quick look at the VISTA terms and conditions of service, and then we'll open up the Q&A to find out what else you need to know about. Finally, we'll share a few important reminders. We'll gather your feedback on today's presentation through a quick survey, and then we'll wrap up our meeting. So here are the goals for this session. First and foremost, we've asked you to log on with us to give our AmeriCorps staff a chance to connect with you and to help ease you into your service year. This webinar is a great way for you to meet other new AmeriCorps members who are also just starting, and then to begin building connections with your colleagues across the country. We'll also take time to reinforce some of the important details of your AmeriCorps service. We know that there's a lot of information coming at you from our office and possibly from your project site. So we'll highlight several critical pieces of information today that we want to make sure you don't miss. And finally, we want to leave you with a good sense of where you can find answers to other questions that you may have that don't get answered today. With our limited time together, we may not be able to answer all of your questions, though we'll work hard to do that in the Q&A. So those are our goals. Chris, you want to get us started?
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy. It is my pleasure to give you this official welcome to AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps VISTA, or Volunteers in Service to America, the acronym. And there are just under 300, about 290 VISTA members beginning service with you this month. And currently, just over 5,000 VISTA members are serving in rural and urban areas in all 50 states and in several U.S. territories and tribal nations. As a new member of VISTA, you are joining a national service program with a rich history. And VISTA has been fighting poverty and building communities for more than 50 years. Our strength comes from the talent, the motivation, and energy of our members like you. So let me give a huge thank you for stepping up to share your skills and your passion to serve our communities. It really is an honor for me to welcome you on behalf of the VISTA program. Here on this slide, you see an image that shows the VISTA program structure with key partners that make your service possible. You can see there are several layers that help support VISTA projects and VISTA members like yourself. The first is the AmeriCorps headquarters, which is located in Washington, D.C. AmeriCorps also has regional offices across the country, In those offices, AmeriCorps staff review and approve proposals for new VISTA projects and approve the placement of members into those projects. The regional office is a great resource for VISTA members who maybe have concerns about their assignments, maybe that the supervisor cannot resolve during their year. And you can reach the regional office by email using the state abbreviation at cns.gov. So an example here, if you're serving in Texas, you can reach your regional office using the state abbreviation TX at cns.gov. Like my home state, North Carolina, NC at cns.gov for North Carolina, and so on. And also in this image, you can see the sponsoring organization is listed along with your supervisor. Your sponsor and supervisor will be your day-to-day support and provide all the details on your project work. At our AmeriCorps headquarters, you will be supported by the VISTA Training Unit and the VISTA Member Support Unit, or VMSU, among other departments. The VMSU is a super helpful resource for questions you may have both now and during your year of service, specifically with regards to your VISTA benefits. And to help make sense of these organizations, there is an AmeriCorps VISTA resources and contacts document available that can be found on, this is found on the Starting VISTA page of the VISTA campus currently. You can also see it in the chat right now. It looks like Mike just shared this in the chat, but it's also in the handout that was emailed earlier in the helpful links document. In this year, you will be joining thousands of VISTA colleagues around the country to fight poverty. The VISTA program mission is to strengthen organizations that fight poverty. And we do that by deploying AmeriCorps members to serve in local community agencies. The VISTA headquarters includes multiple teams and 30 staff. Staff teams include the member support and training units, along with program impact and marketing and outreach. Many of our staff include service alumni of AmeriCorps and CCC, VISTA, the Peace Corps, and more. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Belize in 2010 to 2012. And during your service year, the VMSU will be a great point of contact for any benefits related questions and can be in contact with you throughout the year as ongoing contact. Okay, let's focus for a few moments on you and your role in the VISTA program. So the role of the VISTA member is to support the organization's mission by providing solutions that enhance efficiency and build capacity by various means, by raising money, developing systems, recruiting volunteers, and really creating that lasting change. VISTA members are recruited by their sponsoring organizations, or they find service opportunities on their own and apply directly to VISTA projects through My AmeriCorps. And speaking of recruitment, in that last sentence, we have a quick chat question. So how were you recruited to serve in VISTA? So in other words, did your sponsoring organization recruit you directly, or did you find your position on your own? And how? So just a quick chat activity. Feel free to take a moment and type your answer in the chat. It could be just a short sentence. We'll give it some time so everyone gets the opportunity. And again, please try to toggle so that you are sending it to all panelists and attendees, just so everyone can view your response. And seeing these coming in, oh, they're coming in fast. So some by their university, on my own. Found it listed on the RPCV jobs email list. Return Peace Corps volunteer. Woohoo, Peter. Just looking through My AmeriCorps, I see that a couple of times. Found it on the AmeriCorps website, just through the website. That's great. LinkedIn, I see, recruited directly by my supervisor. So it's a Good mix, yeah. And tons more coming around here. This is interesting. Love seeing these responses. But yeah, if you're still typing, by all means, keep typing away. But thank you so much for those responses and for sharing that. And yeah, we'll move on. I'll pass it back to Andy.
All right, thank you, Chris. So as you've heard in the last few minutes, we are a large and diverse group of folks on this webinar. Yet, no matter what your status is or how you came to apply to the position or accept it, there are a few things that all VISTA members have in common. First, you and your VISTA colleagues are making a 1-year, that is a 365-day full-time commitment to strengthen and support your community through your service. Next, central to all VISTA member service is an important document called your VISTA Assignment Description, or VAD. We love our acronyms here. The VAD represents, or provides rather, for you the overall project goals. It explains the objectives that you will be working towards during your service year, and it lays out the specific activities that you will need to complete in order to accomplish those objectives. All AmeriCorps VISTA members have a VISTA assignment description, and you can find yours on the member homepage in your My AmeriCorps account at my.americorps.gov. It's important to know that your VAD was likely written before you individually were recruited or selected for the position. So some updates may be in order before you actually dive into your service. So you'll want to be sure to check with your supervisor next week and talk about your VAD and whether there are any changes would be useful for you. When we meet again on next Monday's webinar, we'll go into a little more detail about capacity building and the unique nature of your VISTA service. So you'll want to make sure that you have a copy of your VAD by next Monday. So next, we'd like to get a little bit more information about your service. So in the chat, please take a moment to type in your answer to this question. In what city or town will you serve? We have a lot of people on the webinar, so the chat's going to move very quickly. And when you answer, again, remember to choose all panelists and attendees so everyone will be able to see your response. And seeing lots of locations coming through, a lot of places in the middle of the country, you know, Colorado, Indiana, Arizona, some coasts showing up too. We've got Maine and Massachusetts and Oregon, Connecticut. Yeah, and a mix of big towns and smaller locations that I'm not familiar with. So it's great to see the the wide variety of locations that are that are represented in the places where you'll be serving. And also we know that based on the AmeriCorps application that you completed and your service placements, that we have members who will be starting this month in a lot of different communities and also with a lot of different types of AmeriCorps VISTA projects. So thank you for sharing with that little activity. We've got another one here. To get a sense of how many of you will be relocating to serve, we're going to open up a poll. So you'll see a window pop up on your screen. Very simple. And indicate yes or no. Will you be relocating to serve in your VISTA service? So I see the responses are flowing in really quickly, and close to 90% of you have already responded. We'll give it just like maybe 5 more seconds, and then we'll close it off and see where we end up. Last chance to get any final in. All right, well, interestingly, it looks like it's almost an even split. 51% of you said yes, you're going to be relocating to serve. 49% said no. So that's great to know. Thank you so much for sharing. And for those of you who are relocating, sending you every good wish for a safe and easy move. And if you like, you can close out of that little box that appeared on your screen. So today's webinar is one part of a multifaceted orientation that all new VISTA members complete. And on the left side of this graphic, you can see the 3 phases of your orientation. And then to the right of those are some of the major tasks in each of the blocks. This structure is also reflected in the checklist, the VISTA member orientation checklist that you got by email from Chris. And you can also find a link to the checklist in the chat that Mike just pasted in there. Also, you might start off by teleserving. That is, rather than going into the office every day, you'll be serving from home. And even if you do, your supervisor will still be providing you with an on-site orientation and training in your first weeks of service to guide you as you get started. I encourage you to print or save out a copy of that checklist and keep it handy. You can use it as a record of your progress as you move through each phase of orientation and as you complete the important tasks this week and beyond. The phases of your orientation include pre-service, and that's where we are now, right? You haven't yet started serving. Next is your first day of service, day 1, and then in service. It's good to know that orientation to your AmeriCorps service is an ongoing process, and it involves a number of people. We know your position likely will be a complex one, and it takes a bit of time and effort to get you started strong. So let's talk through some of the important elements of the first 2 phases of your orientation. So looking at pre-service tasks, as part of your VISTA member orientation, you're required to complete several courses and tutorials online. These online courses are located on the Starting VISTA Service page of vistacampus.gov, and they must be completed before you start serving next week. Please note that the VISTA campus is undergoing a major renovation this week, and the current site is going to retire this Friday, June 4th, and you'll be redirected to a new site. So please be sure and access and complete all of your coursework by Thursday of this week so that you don't have any disruption in your onboarding. The Terms and Conditions course is linked to your account at my.americorps.gov. So once you complete the course, then you can go to My AmeriCorps to certify your acceptance of the terms there. And as you may know, you must accept the terms and conditions of service in order to start your VISTA service. So we know that there's a lot to do before Monday, and again, you can keep track of your progress on the coursework and your required forms using that VISTA member orientation checklist. In addition to the coursework I just talked about on the VISTA campus, you'll also need to complete your onboarding forms. These include a direct deposit form for your living allowance, a federal tax withholding or W-4 form, unpaid compensation information, and end-of-service benefit selection. All of these forms are located in my.americorps.gov. If you haven't completed these already, please plan on doing it right away. We need these forms completed so that we can officially enroll you in AmeriCorps and process your living allowance and other benefits. There are a number of benefits available to members, and if you haven't already, please go through all the information on benefits that's available on the VISTA campus. All right, so I imagine you may have a lot of questions about what your first day of service will look like. And here's what we know. Your first day of service is Monday, that's June 7th, 2021. That day will begin your orientation to your project site and your specific duties. So your supervisor may have prepared a formal agenda for you and scheduled meetings or other activities at your site or remotely if you're going to be teleserving. Day one schedules will vary by project, so you'll want to check in with your supervisor this week to get a sense of what to expect and any materials that you'll need to have ready on your first day. Along with starting your on-site orientation on Monday, Chris and I will present your second orientation webinar that's called Launching Your VISTA Service. We'll be back online with you for the launching webinar at the same time, right, 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, or however that translates to the time zone where you are. And as with this webinar, you'll receive an email that has participation details. You'll get that in the next couple of days. The link to join can also be found in the Guide to Entering VISTA Service that was emailed to you last week. On next week's webinar, we'll go a little deeper into the VISTA program, your VISTA assignment description, and we'll show you some available resources. We'll also have time for Q&A to make sure you're in good shape for your first week of serving. And on Monday's webinar, we will administer the Oath of Service, that is officially swearing you in to become a VISTA member.
Okay, next up, we're going to dive into a bunch of common questions that VISTAs have, and we'll answer as many as we can today. So I imagine you have a ton of questions about this new VISTA adventure. And typically, new VISTA member questions kind of fall into one of three categories. So there's questions for your project, and that would include for your questions for your sponsoring organization or supervisor. Second, questions for other contacts. And then third, questions for VISTA. And today we'll review some of the most important and time-sensitive questions new VISTA members ask. In some cases, you may have questions about the office setting at your VISTA project, your work schedule, or more. On the screen, you can see a reminder of two questions listed in the VMO FAQs, or that's a whole lot of acronym right there. So the VISTA Member Orientation Frequently Asked Questions. In addition, you may want details on the office dress code or what you should bring to your first day on site. So for these types of questions, reach out early and often to your project supervisor. This person will be able to orient you to your specific project site, the community you'll serve, and the people you'll work with this year. And I'm sure that you have specific questions about some of the benefits of VISTA service. On this screen, you can see two really common questions we receive at VISTA headquarters. So one, does the VISTA Healthcare cover my current medication? Two, does my student loan qualify for deferment or forbearance? And because these types of questions are very personal to you and our VISTA staff doesn't have those details, you'll need to reach out to other contacts to find those answers. So specifically, like for example, for this healthcare question, you can check out the website for the VISTA Healthcare Benefit Administrator. They are called IMG. And you can find a lot of information at their website. We'll include a link in the chat here, but this website is easily reachable through the benefits page on AmeriCorps.gov. There are links to that website included in the handout today as well, in the helpful links. So you can find the benefit plan. If it doesn't say specifically for your specific medication, then there's contact information to call or email IMG on some of those personal and distinct questions. And for the other question about your student loans, we recommend first reviewing the details in the VISTA member handbook about what loans may qualify for forbearance, and then reach out to your specific lender to make sure that it would be qualifying. Finally, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for our VISTA team. And as noted in the FAQs, our staff are often asked about the required background check, healthcare coverage, relocation benefits, the living allowance, and working outside of the VISTA position. So we'll walk through each of these pretty quickly. So on the criminal history check, this is a really big to-do item on your orientation checklist. So you are required to undergo a background investigation prior to starting service. And this includes securely submitting information online to complete a background check, which is at no cost to you. So you should, most of you, the vast majority, should have received an email from support@checker.com with instructions on how to securely submit the required information for the background check. And once you receive the email, you must complete the online background check within 7 days of receipt. So noting that, please ensure that your email address in My AmeriCorps is correct and up to date. And you are required to submit the online background check, again, within 7 calendar days of receiving the email or that link expires. Failure to complete the background check requirements on time could result in a delay in your service start date, and we really don't want that to happen. So if you have any questions on this process, if they're just general questions, or you didn't complete it within 7 days and the link expired, that's okay. Just stay in contact with us is the main thing we want to know. Or if you haven't received the email yet and you have a question, we highly recommend just reaching out to VISTA Fingerprint at cns.gov. This email address is also listed on that resources and context PDF that was shared earlier and is in the helpful links document. It's also included in your guide to entering VISTA service. That was the big document that was emailed early last week on Monday as an attachment that has a lot of juicy information on your VISTA member orientation. So again, VISTA Fingerprint at cns.gov for any questions there. And when your FBI background investigation is completed, we will compare the results to your disclosures in your AmeriCorps application and your disclosure form. And as long as everything aligns, you won't hear from us. So all will be good.
All right, next, let's look at VISTA's healthcare benefits. So I'll give you a few specific details. In about 2 weeks, you'll receive an email from IMG, which is the VISTA Healthcare Administrator. That message will ask you to select the benefit and provide you with instructions for enrolling in it. So you'll be able to enroll during your 2nd week of service, but your coverage will be effective back to your official start date. If you need proof of coverage during your 1st week, you can contact IMG directly, and they can provide you with a temporary coverage card that you can show to your provider. And as a reminder, VISTA program offers 2 different health benefit options. The healthcare allowance is for members who already have health coverage now, like private insurance or Medicaid coverage. And then the VISTA Health Benefit Plan is for those who don't already have health coverage. To receive a benefit, you must enroll. There's no automatic enrollment. So again, you'll have to do this in about 2 weeks when you get an email from IMG, and then you'll have 60 days from the start of your VISTA service to enroll in one of our benefits. If your health coverage changes during your year, then you can change the VISTA health benefit accordingly by contacting IMG. So for example, if you turn 26 and you lose coverage on your parents' plan, then you would need to contact IMG ideally about 30 days before the change happens, and then they will switch you from the healthcare allowance to the health benefit plan. The health coverage is an important benefit, and it's time sensitive, and the type of benefit you receive depends on your current health coverage situation. Each year, a number of new VISTA members relocate to serve in a different community. And as you indicated earlier, about 51% of you here with us indicated that you're relocating. So here's how to know if you're eligible for the VISTA relocation benefit. So first, if you relocate more than 50 miles from your home of record to your service site, or if you will be relocating within your first 45 days of service, then you may qualify for a relocation travel allowance and a one-time settling in allowance. If you are eligible for financial travel support, you should have already received an email from the VISTA Member Support Unit, or what we call the VMSU, and that email includes a relocation form that you would fill out and return. If you already relocated or you plan to relocate more than 50 miles to your service site and you have not gotten that email from the VISTA Member Support Unit, or if you have questions about the relocation form, you can reach out to them at vmsu@cns.gov. All right, so let's talk about your living allowance. Quick question here. Does anyone know when you will get paid your first living allowance payment? If so, you can type your answer in the chat. Got one response so far, a couple coming in, some with question marks, some not sure, don't know. A few of you have said June 25th. Correct. So we'll reveal that answer. Your first living allowance payment is in fact scheduled to be on Friday, June 25th. Most VISTA members are paid directly by the AmeriCorps program. You get paid every 2 weeks on Fridays. However, some VISTA members are paid by their sponsoring organization, and their pay calendar might be slightly different from ours. Your supervisor can tell you if you will be paid directly by them, and if so, then your supervisor can share their pay schedule in case it might be slightly different. It's good to know that federal taxes are withheld from your living allowance payments, but state income taxes are not. So you'll need to determine your own level of responsibility for state income tax. We suggest you check your state income tax office. They probably have a website to get more details on what it's like in the state where you are. And if you're paid by us from AmeriCorps headquarters, you can access your living allowance statement from your account at my.americorps.gov. If you're paid directly by your VISTA sponsor, then you will get pay statements from them. So the amount of living allowance that you'll receive in your biweekly payments will depend on where your service site is located. The pay rates vary by county. So if you haven't already, you can access the pay rate chart on AmeriCorps.gov to verify the amount that you'll receive. Please note that the pay rates show the gross pay, that's the full amount. That doesn't indicate any amount of federal taxes that will be deducted from your biweekly pay. You can see the link there in the chat. And just a reminder about direct deposit. In order to ensure that you receive your living allowance, it's critical that you complete the direct deposit information correctly. If either the routing number or the account number that you enter is not correct, then you won't get paid as scheduled, right? Your living allowance won't show up in your bank account. and you'll have to wait at least 2 more weeks until the next pay period in order to get that payment deposited. You probably know you can find the routing number and account number on your checks. That is, if you have paper checks. If not, you can go to your online banking site and look at one of your account statements and get your account number there. You might also want to call your bank just to make sure that you have the correct information. And then, as you're entering it into My AmeriCorps, be sure to double check that the numbers are right.
And as noted in the VISTA Terms and Conditions course on the campus, VISTA members may be able to work another job during their service terms. There are a few conditions to make this possible. First, the job must not interfere with your VISTA schedule or requirements. You must discuss the demands of the other job with your supervisor and confirm it will not prevent you from successfully completing your VISTA assignment responsibilities. And your supervisor must indicate approval on the outside employment form. We'll drop a link in the chat to that form right now. It's also linked in the helpful links document that was an attachment this morning. And I know it's another form. You probably have a ton of forms you're filling out for VISTA, for your project, and otherwise. But I promise this is a quick one. It's a one-pager. You can fill it out quickly if you have outside employment. So those are a few of the questions new VISTA members most frequently ask. And at this point, prior to your start date and your service start date, it's really understandable if you have a lot of questions, possibly for your project supervisor, for other contacts, and for our VISTA staff. And really hope this quick review was helpful and you have a good idea of really where to find additional information if needed. Okay, looking back at our agenda, so far today we've reviewed VISTA's mission and structure, your orientation, and some of the most pressing questions you may have. And at this time, as we mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session, we'll invite you now to share any follow-up questions or questions that come up during our next agenda item by using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the slides. And before we log off today, we'll work through as many questions as we can. We have both Eric and Kyle will be helping in the Q&A, and we'll also have a short time to answer live questions on the Q&A coming up. But next up, we'll take a brief look at some of the concepts covered in the VISTA Terms and Conditions course. As you know, there is a required course. Andy just spoke about it. You've seen it in the communications. That's on the VISTA campus that covers the rules of participation in AmeriCorps. That is what is allowable while you are serving as a VISTA member. Since VISTA members are bound by a variety of laws, regulations, and other rules, we really want to make sure you understand them from day one so you can feel comfortable in your new position. If you've already completed the Terms and Conditions course, our next activity should be an easy review for you. So that's great. And if you haven't yet completed the course, this will help emphasize some of the most sensitive issues. So here on the slide, you see the categories of activities addressed in the Terms and Conditions course. As a review today, Andy and I will walk through a couple of real-life scenarios to see whether or not these are allowable according to VISTA's terms and conditions. And how? So this is what we'll do. We'll present several scenarios and ask you to indicate just a quick yes or no, a Y or in the chat. So you can just type Y or N for each scenario. So for this first scenario, you can see the text on the screen. So I can voice my political opinions using social media where my profile identifies me as an AmeriCorps member. So per the terms and conditions, are members allowed to do this? yes or no. Already see a whole bunch of responses coming in. I have seen 100% ends or no's. I saw a yes slip in. Always love to see a little variation. And who knows, might be right, maybe not. We'll give it it looks like many have responded. We'll give it a few more seconds, make sure everyone can respond. I can voice my political opinions using social media where my profile identifies me as an AmeriCorps member. So thank you for those thoughts, and we will provide the answer. It is yes. Ooh, shocker there. So you can have AmeriCorps listed on your personal social media profile and voice your own personal political opinions as part of your online life. However, you cannot represent yourself as a spokesperson for AmeriCorps, for VISTA, or for your sponsor. Additionally, you can voice political opinions on your own time, but not while serving at your site or while teleserving, nor while using any of the equipment at your site. And that could include the Wi-Fi network or your office computer at your site. Also, you should not put the AmeriCorps logo as your profile picture when voicing political or other sensitive opinions on social media. For these type of scenarios, when in doubt, keep your AmeriCorps service and political activity completely separate. Is what we recommend.
All right, so here's the next scenario. I can demonstrate in a political rally. So per the terms and conditions of VISTA service, are you allowed to do this? Again, use yes or no, Y or N in the chat. And again, you guys are really quick responders. I see lots and lots of yeses. Yep, a few more coming in here. All right, well, we'll give you just like 2 more seconds and see if there's any dissent from that, any variation from the yes. All right, let's go ahead. We'll reveal the answer, and you guys nailed this one. Yes, you can demonstrate in a political rally, but you've got to do it on your own time, and as long as you're not identified as an AmeriCorps member or perceived to be an AmeriCorps member. And it's that perceived to be an AmeriCorps member that's an important consideration, since some of you may be serving in a small town or in a local area where even though you're not necessarily wearing anything that, brands you as an AmeriCorps member, people still will know who you are, and they'll know that you're affiliated with the AmeriCorps program. So that's something you'd have to be aware of. And when in doubt about a specific activity, it's best to consult with your supervisor or the AmeriCorps regional office to get clarification before you take any action.
Okay, next up, what do you think about this one? I can ask people to donate money to a partisan political candidate, as long as it's on my own time and I'm not identified as an AmeriCorps member. See some responses already coming in. So again, per the terms and conditions, are you allowed to ask people to donate money to a partisan political candidate if it's on your own time? And there's a good mix here. Out of the questions so far, I would say this is the biggest mix. Probably leaning yes, but I'm going to say it's like 59% yes and a little 41 no. We'll see if that changes. We'll give it a few more seconds for everyone to respond. Get a little drum roll going, and here is the answer. And this is an important one. It is no. You cannot raise money on behalf of a partisan political candidate at any time during your AmeriCorps year. It doesn't matter if it's off duty or at home or while not identified as an AmeriCorps member. The federal law called the Hatch Act prohibits all fundraising for partisan political candidates. What you can do, however, is you can raise funds in support of an issue or a cause on your own time and when you are not identified as an AmeriCorps member. So just that difference between an issue and a partisan political candidate is the big emphasis there. Okay, great. So thank you for going through these scenarios. And I know while the terms and conditions of your AmeriCorps service contain many rules, we do know that these issues in particular tend to raise a lot of questions for new members. And again, we want you to feel comfortable getting started. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your project supervisor or AmeriCorps regional office if you have more questions about these activities or something similar that might pop up. And again, as a reminder, you'll need to complete the full terms and conditions course and indicate you've completed it in your My AmeriCorps account. Okay, back to the agenda. And I know we covered a lot of information. So let's take a few minutes to address some of the questions you may have for VISTA. So Andy and I are going to take a look at what questions you have shared in the Q&A. And if you're still typing up a question, by all means, again, a reminder, there's that little Q&A button at the bottom of the slides. Ideally, any questions will go there instead of the chat, just because as you've seen, the chat can move fast at times and we'll lose those questions. So feel free to continue putting any questions in there. We're going to highlight ones that should apply to most everyone and continue to address as many of your individual questions as well as we can until we wrap up the webinar today. And please know, in some cases, our answer may be to refer you to your project or another contact for the answer to your question if they're going to know the exact answer. So, okay, Andy, I don't know if you've had a chance. I'm just kind of scrolling through myself right now to see what questions popped up. I didn't know if you had seen any.
Yeah, there were a number of questions here, a few about living allowance, so maybe we can start there. And first were some questions about the rates vary by county, and so the question was, well, which county? Is it the county where my project is located or where I'm living? Because maybe I'm living in another county. And the answer to that is it's based on the county where you serve. So wherever your site is located, that's the county that's used to determine the amount of your living allowance. And that living allowance is your pay, quote unquote. I mean, you're not a formal employee. The living allowance is offered as a benefit of your national service participation. But that living allowance is the only thing that you're going to receive from the VISTA program.
And yeah, looking through as well and see the living allowance ones.
There was another one about, sorry, Chris, about relocation benefits. So we mentioned that those who are relocating 50 miles or more, there's two parts to the benefit, one that's based on mileage and then another one that we call the settling allowance. The question was, if I'm not relocating, do I get that settling in allowance? And the answer to that is no. The settling in is really just for those who are moving because they're going to have expenses related to, maybe security deposits or setting up new utility accounts, those kinds of things. So that's what the settling in allowance is for.
And I saw a couple questions on, how do we know that we have completed all of our pre-service coursework and pre-service forms? So great question. That's one big reason why we were recommending tracking your progress using the VIMO checklist, just to make sure everything's completed. So on the current VISTA campus, It doesn't track all of the pre-service coursework. So some of those recommended courses that we mentioned in the guide to entering VISTA service, like your benefits of VISTA service, the mission and program goals of VISTA, those aren't tracked. Those are recommended, and we highly recommend that you complete them so you know your benefits and you know the mission and program goals that you're prior to starting service. But those aren't specifically tracked. That's actually one big reason why as Andy mentioned, we're having this big upgrade to the new campus coming this weekend. So y'all are along for the ride with us as we, as there's any upgrade to a website, there may be some kinks, but we're making sure it's going to go as smooth as possible. But yeah, so basically for the required forms, the required pre-service coursework, you'll hear from us if you're missing anything after tomorrow's deadline. Tomorrow's the forms deadline. So the VMSU will reach out, let you know what may be missing and where that's located. But if you don't hear from us, then you're good. So it's kind of a no news is good news situation there.
Great. Chris, I also saw a few questions related to healthcare. So maybe we'll talk about all those together. So one is, can I get an AmeriCorps health benefit if I'm still on my parents' insurance? And the answer is yes. So if you have coverage, doesn't matter if it's through your parents or if, a plan that you got on your own or through some other way. If you have coverage, then you qualify for the VISTA healthcare allowance. If you don't have coverage, then you would sign up for the health benefit plan, which is our own sort of coverage plan. A couple of folks asked, how much do these things cost? The great news is there's no cost to you. It doesn't cost anything to sign up for either our health benefit plan or the healthcare allowance. So, you sign up for those. It doesn't take anything away from your living allowance.
And I'll just mention some of these questions. They're great questions, by the way, are also answered on the FAQ document that was sent as an attachment. And totally okay. I mean, that was only sent early this morning. You maybe didn't have time to read through it, so totally get it that you're asking here. But just want to point that out, that you may want to check that out when you get a chance, because it also may have answers to questions that you hadn't thought of. So I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, very good. And then one other thing related to healthcare, if you're relocating and you're going to be moving to a new state, you'll need to be getting different healthcare coverage, right? Because the plan that you have likely doesn't work in another state. So you'll want to check that out and see if, if the coverage you currently have, you would need to replace that with new coverage in the new state where you'll be serving.
Yeah, and Andy, I'm seeing several questions on like what specifically the health benefit plan covers, like, and we can try to go through some of these just to say in general, but again, we highly recommend, this is one of those questions that is for IMG, the health benefit administrator. We highly recommend checking out their website. They actually have the health plan guide as a PDF on their website, so you can see, if your specific medication may be covered. But as Andy said, there's the difference. There's the healthcare allowance, which that's if you have currently have health coverage. The healthcare allowance will help to reimburse you for out-of-pocket costs, like maybe prescription costs or co-pays or money going towards your deductible. That's if you have health coverage. If you don't have health coverage, then there's the health benefit plan that you can sign up for, and it's kind of a basic plan, but it has really low co-pays, really low prescription costs, but it doesn't cover pre-existing conditions, which, yeah, that's a big thing. But Yeah, those are kind of the basics for it, but we're seeing a lot of questions here on specifics. So again, we'd highly recommend checking out the plan on IMG's website, or you can contact them as well if it's easier. They have a phone and email readily available.
Great. A couple of questions related to relocation. So a couple of you have indicated that currently, as you get started, you'll be teleserving, and then sometime later in the year, you will relocate, and then you'll begin serving on-site at your sponsoring organization. And in that case, yeah, you're still eligible to get the relocation allowance, that support. And within 45 days before you actually relocate, you'd want to reach out to the VISTA Member Support Unit, let them know that you're going to be relocating so that they can prepare everything and get the funds ready to support you in that.
Looking through, I know Eric and Kyle are answering simultaneously, so sometimes, but yeah, Andy, do you see others?
Yeah, there was another question about, we didn't really talk about in this webinar, but about putting your loan into forbearance status. So if you've read through that information on the benefits page, you know that if you select the education award, you can put your loan into forbearance status so you don't make payments during your service year. You'll sign up for that in My AmeriCorps, but you can't do it until after you start serving and your account is activated. So that would be the middle to end of next week that your account will show those updates, and that form will then become available in My AmeriCorps.
Yeah, and I would just say, just in general, there's a lot of items that will be available once activated. That's as Andy mentioned, in terms of forbearance, if that's what you're wishing to select in your My AmeriCorps account. Also, your service letters, if you need to show your proof of service, or just to have the official currently serving letter. Or if you need to show that to a benefits administrator for whatever reason, you'll have your service letters available once you're activated, which is, like Andy said, maybe late next week. That's in addition to signing up for the health plan. Whichever health benefits you would be eligible for, that email that's going to come to you is going to be sent right after you're activated. Like, I think it's 24 hours after you're activated. So a number of things that will be available, not immediately on your first day, but probably like towards the end of your first week of service.
One last thing, Chris, a couple of folks asked about whether they need to get fingerprinted as part of the background check. And the answer to that is no. It's an online check. If you've already filled out the form at the checker website, then that's all you need to do. There's no fingerprinting required for that.
Great catch. And I do see a question on end of service cash stipend versus education award. Again, I would recommend checking out the FAQs on this, but yes, if one thing to note is, if you still go into the benefits page, there's plenty of information on AmeriCorps.gov, the benefits section, on these two options. If you still have time to make a change up until your first day of service. Although the forms deadline is tomorrow, you could still make a change from one to the other up until Monday. But we also want to point out the big caveat here. So like, if you're on the fence and you're not sure if you want the education award or the cash stipend, we highly, highly recommend that you select the education award now. And that's because in those cases where you're on the fence, you would have up until the end of your 10th month of service to change to the cash stipend to make that switch. But the reverse isn't true. Once you select the cash stipend, that's a final decision once you're activated. So you can't make a change later. So that's kind of why we recommend selecting the education award when in doubt. That way you have some leeway to change later.
All right, I think we've covered a lot of the main category. There are obviously some specific questions, and our team is working to answer those individually through the Q&A. So if we didn't cover your question verbally, you can look for a response to come in a few minutes within the Q&A. Chris, did you see anything else that we should answer before moving on?
No, I would agree, Andy. I mean, want to acknowledge, like you said, there are still a couple of questions in there, but I know Eric and Kyle are in the process of answering those. Yeah, if you still have a question, feel free to keep throwing them in the Q&A, and we'll answer those individually. But yeah, I think we can move on.
All right. So thank you for taking time to talk through some of your questions with us. We'll also have open Q&A time on next Monday's webinar, and we can address more questions at that time. But next, let's turn our attention to some online resources that you have, a few reminders for this week, and then a couple of closing remarks. So these are the two websites that have figured prominently today and in some of the emails that you've received from us. If you haven't already, please bookmark these sites so you can easily find and quickly access them at any time. And as a reminder, my.americorps.gov is the My AmeriCorps portal that you may hear sometimes people call it just the portal. This is a website where you applied for your AmeriCorps position, and this is where you'll complete your direct deposit and your other onboarding forms, and it's where you will access your VISTA assignment description. It's also where in a couple of weeks you'll be able to access your living allowance statements, request some of the benefits we talked about today like loan forbearance, and then you can print or save a letter that verifies your status as an AmeriCorps member. The VISTA campus is located at vistacampus.gov, at least until late Thursday, and then it'll change, but you can still go there and it'll redirect you to the new site. This is the website where you complete your onboarding coursework and the tutorials that we've been talking about. And as a reminder, this site will retire on Friday. So we want to make sure that you access all your onboarding material by then. Don't wait till the last minute.
Great. And I know we just have a few minutes left on our session today. And one last reminder, as Andy was mentioning as well, about the coursework, the onboarding forms, and online criminal history check that are due from you. And be sure to use that VISTA member orientation checklist to keep track as you work your way through this list. Finally, today, we'd love your feedback on the presentation to know what worked well for you or how can we improve this presentation for future VISTA members. So just ask that you please take a few moments to complete the brief survey. We will use your input right away as we prepare for both our webinar next week and a busy summer with a lot of VISTA's onboarding. So we appreciate your feedback, and we do use your feedback. You'll see a link in the chat right now that you can use, and we'll also, it should be designed where as you close out of Zoom, the survey evaluation should appear in your browser. And with that, I just want to revisit our session goals. So today, I hope that we have started to build some new connections and put faces to names and that we helped clarify some of the complexity of starting your VISTA service. We certainly know this is a busy time for you and so much information is available and hitting you every which way. And again, I hope today's discussion really helps clarify some of the VISTA requirements and helps you know where to go to find information that you may need. So thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar from Andy and I and all of us here at AmeriCorps. Thank you for joining the VISTA team. And we look forward to seeing you again on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is the exact same time as this webinar started, for our second orientation webinar in your first day of service. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you again. And this will conclude our webinar.